The night was cold and the streets were darker than usual. The wind carried dust and the smell of smoke from broken chimneys. In the middle of that forgotten town walked a lonely figure, an alien widow. Her shawl was thin, torn at the edges, and her steps were heavy. She had not eaten for 2 days, and every sound of laughter or food being cooked was like a knife in her stomach. Her name was not known to the humans. They only called her the widow. They whispered. Behind her back, some said she was cursed. Some said she was dangerous. But most simply ignored her. For them, she was just another outsider, broken and unwanted. The widow moved slowly past the houses. Her large alien eyes reflected the faint lights of lamps. They glowed faintly, a trait of her kind. Her stomach growled so loudly that even stray dogs lifted their heads. She pressed her hand over her belly, trying to silence it, but hunger was stronger than pride. She passed by a bakery that was shutting down for the night. The warm smell of bread made her knees weak. She stopped for a moment, watching the baker toss leftovers into a bin. He glanced at her but quickly turned away, locking the door. She wanted to beg, but the words froze in her throat. She remembered her late husband, his proud voice saying, "Never bow, even if the world breaks you." But he was gone now, and pride did not fill the stomach. The widow walked further, and her eyes caught something, a small window glowing with a soft yellow light. Inside, she saw a human family eating dinner. A man, tired but strong, sat at the table. A little girl laughed, her cheeks round with health. The smell of soup and bread floated out through the cracks in the wall. The widow's lips trembled. She could almost taste it just by breathing. She did not notice her legs stopping. Her hands gripped the wooden fence. She watched silently, like a shadow. The man's hand rested on his daughter's head, and for a moment, pain filled the widow's chest stronger than hunger. She once had a child, a boy, but war had taken him. Her mate too had fallen, leaving her alone with nothing. The memory was heavy, but the sound of the girl's laughter pulled her back to the present. Suddenly, the window opened, and the little girl spotted her. The widow froze. Her glowing eyes met the child's curious stare. The girl tilted her head, not afraid. Her voice was clear and innocent. "Papa, there's someone outside." The father looked up. His face carried scars of hard work and grief. He saw the alien woman standing weakly near the fence, his brows lowered, not in anger but in caution. He got up and walked to the door. The widow stepped back quickly, afraid he would shout or throw something. But before the father could speak, the little girl rushed past him. She ran outside barefoot. Carrying a piece of bread in her small hand, she stood in front of the widow and stretched her arm out. "Here, you look hungry." The widow's throat tightened. Her hands shook as she reached for the bread. Her lips moved, but no words came. She wanted to say thank you, but her voice was gone. The bread was soft, warm, and smelled like hope. She took a bite, and tears filled her eyes. The father reached the door. His voice was stern but not cruel. "Lena, come back inside." The little girl looked up at him, then back at the widow. Her eyes were too innocent, too bold. She whispered, something that froze both the widow and her father. "Papa, if she's hungry, why don't you marry her? Then she can eat with us every day." The widow's heart skipped. The bread almost slipped from her hand. She stared at the child in disbelief. The father froze at the door, his face pale with shock. The night wind carried silence across the street. Only the little girl's innocent words remained, echoing in the widow's mind like a promise she never expected. The widow stood there, her tears mixing with the dust on her cheeks. She was just a hungry alien widow, forgotten by the world. But in that single moment, a human child had seen her not as a curse, not as a burden, but as someone who deserved a place at the table. And for the first time in years, the widow felt something stronger than hunger. She felt the smallest spark of hope. The night air was still, but the little girl's words hung heavy between them. The alien widow stared at the child, unable to believe what she had heard. Her hands trembled as she clutched the half-eaten bread. The father stood frozen in the doorway, his rough hands gripping the frame as if steadying himself against the weight of his daughter's bold voice. "Lena," he whispered, his tone sharp. "That's not something you should say." But the little girl only tilted her head, her innocent eyes wide and serious. "Why not, Papa? She's hungry and she looks so lonely." Her small voice cut through the cold, and the widow felt her chest ache in ways hunger never could. The widow wanted to step back into the shadows, to vanish before she brought more trouble, but her legs would not move. She was too weak, too tired, and too surprised. Her glowing alien eyes blinked, catching the flicker of the lamp behind the man. She had been called many things before, stray, beggar, curse, but never had anyone, even a child, spoken of her as if she belonged. The father rubbed his forehead, sighing heavily. He looked at the widow again. His gaze was not cruel, but full of hesitation. She could see it. He was torn, his jaw clenched as if holding back words. The silence stretched until finally he spoke. "Come inside, before the neighbors see." The widow's heart jumped. She looked around quickly. Already, sensing eyes in the darkness, humans were known to gossip. Some hated her kind, some feared them. To be seen standing near this man's home could cause whispers, and whispers in such towns turned into stones. The little girl, Lena, grabbed her hand without waiting for an answer. Her small fingers were warm against the widow's cold skin. Tugging her gently, she said, "Come. Mama used to say no one should eat alone." The widow stiffened at that word, Mama, but allowed herself to be led. Inside, the house was simple but alive. A wooden table stood in the center with 2 bowls of soup and bread. The smell wrapped around the widow like a soft blanket. Her knees felt weak. The man closed the door firmly, as if sealing them away. From the outside world, he spoke again, his voice lower now. "You can sit for a moment, eat what's left, then go." The widow nodded quickly, ashamed to want more. She lowered herself onto the edge of a chair. Her eyes stayed down, staring. At the steam rising from the bowl, the little girl placed the bread in front of her and grinned proudly. "See, Papa, she's happier already." The widow lifted the spoon with shaking hands. Her first sip of soup made her throat burn, but in a good way. Warmth spread down to her empty stomach. Tears blurred her vision. She ate slowly, afraid it would vanish if she rushed. The father leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching silently. His expression was unreadable. When the bowl was half empty, Lena leaned close to her father and whispered loudly enough that the widow could hear. "I like her. She should stay. You should marry her." The widow choked on her soup, coughing until her eyes watered. The father frowned, his voice firm this time. "Enough, Lena. You don't understand what you're saying." But Lena stood stubbornly, her small fists on her hips. "I do understand, Papa. You're always tired. You eat alone when I sleep. You never laugh anymore. If she stays, you won't be lonely and she won't be hungry." The child's words were simple, but each one struck like an arrow. The widow set the spoon down. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She wanted to explain that she was not someone to be wanted. She was marked by loss, by sorrow, and by the prejudice of both humans and her own people. But when she looked at Lena, she saw no fear, no disgust, only pure trust. The father's eyes softened, just for a moment, then hardened again. "Go to bed, Lena," he said quietly. "We'll talk later." The little girl huffed, but obeyed. Climbing up the narrow stairs, her small footsteps echoed until they vanished. The room fell into silence. The widow sat awkwardly, her hands gripping the edge of the table. The man finally spoke, his tone heavy. "You should know. This town does not welcome your kind. If they see you here, they'll make trouble for both of us." His eyes lingered on her thin frame, the hollow cheeks, the glowing eyes that still carried quiet dignity. "Why are you still here?" The widow raised her gaze slowly. Her voice cracked as she whispered for the first time in days. "Because your child saw me, and no one has seen me in a long time." The man stared at her. His breath caught. For a moment, he saw not a stranger, not an alien, but someone who carried the same wounds he did, grief and loneliness that no words could hide. The night stretched on. The widow sat in silence, the bowl empty before her. the man's thoughts restless. And upstairs, the little girl dreamed, believing her bold words might be the beginning of something greater than she knew. The house was quiet, but the silence did not bring peace. The little girl slept upstairs, her breathing soft and even. But downstairs, the father sat at the table with his hands folded tight. Across from him, the alien widow sat with her head lowered, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The empty bowl between them seemed heavier than stone. The father's name was Daniel. He had worked hard all his life, breaking wood, fixing roofs, and carrying loads for others. His hands were scarred, his back bent from years of labor. He was no stranger to hunger or cold nights, yet seeing the widow eat, seeing her trembling hands holding the spoon, had stirred something inside him that he could not name. Daniel sighed. His daughter's bold words still echoed in his ears. Marry her, so she can eat every day. It was the kind of thing only a child would say, but it had shaken him. He had lost his wife years ago. A sickness took her in the winter. Since then, he had carried both the role of father and mother. His heart had turned to stone, or so he thought until tonight. He looked at the widow again. She sat quietly, almost like a shadow. Her thin shoulders curved inward, as if she wanted to make herself smaller. He noticed the faint marks on her arms, old scars, perhaps from war or punishment. She was not only hungry but also broken. Yet there was strength in the way she held her silence. Pride still lived in her even after everything had been taken. Daniel rubbed his forehead. "You can't stay here," he finally said. His voice was low but steady. "If the neighbors see, they will talk, and talking turns to anger fast in this town." The widow lifted her eyes slowly. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "I know. I will leave when the night passes. I did not mean to bring trouble. I only followed the smell of food." Her words stabbed at him. He wanted to believe she was just another burden, a mouth to feed when he already struggled. But deep inside, he remembered the way his daughter's face lit up, the joy in her eyes when she offered bread to the stranger. Lena had not smiled like that in weeks, not since her mother died. Daniel pushed away from the table and stood, pacing across the small. "You should not trust humans so easily," he muttered. "Not everyone will give you bread, some would give you stones instead." The widow's lips curved in a sad smile. "Not everyone is cruel either tonight. A child gave me life again." He stopped at those words, turning to look at her. Her eyes shimmered like wet glass, glowing faintly in the lamplight. He saw no threat in her, no danger, only loneliness. The same loneliness that had lived in his own chest for too long. But Daniel's mind was heavy with fear. He knew how people in this town thought. They looked at aliens with suspicion, with hate. They would whisper that he was a fool, or worse, a traitor if they ever saw her under his roof. He had worked hard to keep his daughter safe. Could he risk that for a stranger? He sat again, his voice softer now. "What is your name?" For a moment, the widow blinked, surprised anyone cared to ask. "Ciora," she whispered. "My name is Ciora." It had been so long since she said it aloud, it almost felt foreign. On her tongue, Daniel repeated it quietly, testing it like a secret. Ciora. The name hung between them like a fragile thread. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Where is your family?" Her eyes dimmed, shadows of memory crossing her face. "Gone," she said simply. "War took my mate. Sickness took my child. I have nothing left, except hunger." Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to say something, but the words felt stuck. He thought of his own loss. His wife's laughter gone from the house, the empty bed he never warmed again. In Ciora's pain, he saw a reflection of his own. The night grew deeper. The wind outside howled against the wooden walls. Daniel stared. At the flickering lamp, his mind was torn in two directions. On one side, there was caution, the fear of neighbors, the need to protect his daughter from trouble. On the other side, there was compassion, a voice he thought he had buried with his wife, telling him that no one deserved to starve, not even a stranger. Ciora rose slowly, her shawl slipping from her thin shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice heavy with sorrow. "For the bread, for the warmth. I will go now." She turned toward the door, but before her hand touched the wood, Daniel's voice stopped her. "Wait," he said sharply. She froze, her heart beating fast. His eyes narrowed, not in anger but in struggle. "Stay until the morning. It's too dangerous outside. Wolves roam these streets at night, and—" his words faltered. "My daughter will cry if she wakes and finds you gone." Ciora turned her head slowly, her eyes widening with disbelief. For the first time in years, she felt someone was holding her back. Not to harm her, but to keep her safe. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Closing his eyes, his heart was heavy, torn between fear of the town and the warmth he saw in his child's smile. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was certain: his life and his daughter's would no longer be the same. That year. Morning light crept into the small wooden house, soft and golden. Daniel sat at the table, staring at the dying embers in the fireplace. He had not slept much. His thoughts twisted all night. Questions gnawed at him. What would the neighbors say if they learned an alien widow slept under his roof? Would they attack? Would they whisper poison into his daughter's ears? Upstairs, Lena's laughter rang out. It was a sound Daniel had not heard in weeks. It was pure and bright. He looked up as she came rushing down the stairs, her hair messy, her little hands clutching a blanket. Behind her, slowly descending, was Ciora, the widow. She looked uneasy, her glowing eyes lowered. She held the shawl tighter around her shoulders, as if it could shield her from judgment. "Papa," Lena chirped, her voice full of excitement. "She's still here." She ran to Ciora and tugged her hand. "Can we eat together, please, can we?" Daniel's heart twisted. He had promised himself never to let outsiders too close. Not after losing his wife. Not when the world already gave them so much grief. Yet here was his daughter, smiling brighter than he had seen in years, all because of this widow. "Sit," Daniel said at last. His voice was firm, but his eyes softened when they met Ciora's. She hesitated, but Lena pulled her toward the chair. Daniel placed bread and a pot of porridge on the table. The smell of oats filled the air, simple but warm. Ciora sat stiffly, her hands folded in her lap. She whispered, "I should not take your food, you already have so little." Daniel shook his head. "We share what we have. A meal means more when eaten together." The words surprised even him. He had not meant to sound so gentle. Lena clapped her hands and began eating. Her small spoon clinked against the bowl. Ciora lifted her own spoon slowly. Her hands trembled less than the night before. The first taste brought tears to her eyes. She blinked quickly, trying to hide them. But Daniel saw they ate in silence at first, only the sound of spoons and crackling fire between them. Then Lena began to chatter. "Papa, can she stay forever? She tells the prettiest stories," she said. Her people had glowing gardens that sang at night. Ciora froze, her spoon halfway to her lips. Daniel glanced at her, curious. "You spoke to her?" Daniel asked quietly. Ciora nodded, lowering her eyes. "Only a little. She asked me why." My eyes glow. "I told her about the gardens of my home. We grew fruit that shone like stars and rivers that hummed when the wind touched them." Her voice trembled, heavy with memories. "But those gardens are ashes now." The room grew quiet. Even Lena stopped moving her spoon. Daniel felt a heaviness settle over them. He had known she carried sorrow, but hearing it in her voice made it real. "I'm sorry," he said simply, and the honesty in his tone startled her. She nodded once, whispering back, "So am I." The warmth of the porridge filled their stomachs, but another warmth began to grow at that table, fragile but real. Daniel looked at his daughter, smiling at Ciora as if she had known her forever. He looked at Ciora, her thin frame slowly relaxing as if she had not felt safety in years. Something inside him shifted, but shadows were never far. A sharp knock at the door made them all freeze. Daniel's head turned sharply. His instincts burned with caution. He stood and motioned for Ciora to stay seated. He opened the door to find a neighbor, a thick man with a suspicious glare. "Daniel," he said, his voice rough. "People say they saw you take in one of them, is it true?" Daniel's jaw tightened. He blocked the neighbor's view with his broad shoulders. "I don't know what you heard, but I keep my business inside my walls." The man leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "Careful, Daniel. These creatures bring nothing but trouble. You don't want your girl mixed up with one of them." With that, he spat on the ground and walked away, leaving dust in his wake. Daniel closed the door hard, his hands clenched into fists. He turned back to see Lena hugging Ciora tightly, as if afraid someone would take her away. Ciora's glowing eyes shimmered with fear and shame. She whispered, "I should leave. I will only bring danger to you." Daniel's heart pounded. He wanted to agree to protect his daughter from risk. But then he saw Lena's small arms wrapped around Ciora, her innocent trust. He heard her voice from last night echo in his mind. "Why don't you marry her? Then she can eat with us every day." He shook his head firmly. "No," he said, his voice steady. "You stay. A shared meal means more than fear. We'll face the whispers together." Ciora's lips parted in shock. Her heart raced. She had expected rejection, not protection. Lena's eyes sparkled with joy, and she whispered, "See, Papa, I told you." The fire crackled louder as if agreeing. For the first time in many winters, the table did not feel empty. It felt like the beginning of something dangerous. Yes, but also something beautiful. The days passed slowly. Yet in the small wooden house, something began to change. For the first time in years, Daniel heard laughter at his table. Lena's voice carried joy again, and Ciora's quiet presence filled the empty spaces that grief had left. But outside their walls, the world was not blind. Whispers stirred, spreading like smoke through dry grass. Ciora felt it before Daniel did. Her kind had senses sharper than humans. One afternoon, as she returned from gathering water, she froze near the well. Her ears caught voices rough and low. A group of alien men stood at the corner, their faces marked with tribal scars. They were from her old colony, survivors who had turned bitter after the war. "She hides with the humans," one spat, his voice full of venom. "Our sister lowers herself for scraps of bread." Another laughed cruelly. "She was always weak, better to let her starve than shame us." Their words pierced her like knives. She gripped the bucket tighter, her glowing eyes dimming with pain. Ciora walked home quickly, her steps light, not wanting to draw attention. Inside, Lena ran to greet her, chattering about drawings she had made. Daniel looked up from chopping wood, his sharp eyes caught the shadow on Ciora's face. "What happened?" he asked. She shook her head, forcing a small smile. "Nothing." But Daniel was not fooled. He had seen the way her hands trembled slightly as she set down the water. Later that night, when Lena had gone to bed, he pressed again. "Tell me." His voice was calm but firm. Ciora hesitated, shame curling in her chest. At last she whispered, "My people saw me. They call me traitor for being here. They will not leave me in peace." Daniel's jaw tightened. He had expected trouble from humans, but he had not thought of this. He rubbed his forehead, the weight of her words heavy. "Will they harm you?" Ciora's silence was answer enough. The days that followed grew tense. Neighbors muttered louder when Daniel walked through town. Some refused to greet him. Others warned him in sharp tones. "Send her away, Daniel. She'll bring ruin to your doorstep." He ignored them, but his heart was heavy. Each night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, torn between fear for his daughter and the strange pull he felt toward the widow who now sat at his table. Ciora, too, struggled. At night, she sat by the window, staring at the moon, remembering her son, remembering the gardens of her home before they turned to ash. Her people once sang beneath the stars, but now even their songs had turned bitter. She whispered to herself, "Perhaps I do not deserve this kindness." One evening, Lena climbed into her lap, holding up a drawing made with bits of charcoal. It showed 3 figures, her father, herself, and Ciora, all holding hands. Ciora's breath caught. "Why am I here?" she asked softly. Lena grinned. Because you're family now. The simple words tore open Siora's heart. She hugged the child tightly, whispering into her hair, "You give me more than you know." But shadows crept closer. On the fifth night, stones struck the window. Daniel rushed outside to find no one, only voices in the dark. "Alien witch," someone hissed. "Leave the human alone." He returned inside, his face grim. "It has begun," he said quietly. Siora lowered, her eyes guilt flooding her chest. "I should go," she whispered. "Before it costs you everything." Daniel's voice rose sharper than she expected. "No. You think leaving will protect us, but it will only break Lena's heart. And mine too, if I'm honest." His words shocked them both. He turned away, embarrassed by his own honesty, but it was the truth. That night, as the fire burned low, Siora sat awake long after the others slept. She heard footsteps outside, slow and deliberate. Her people's voices whispered again. "Tomorrow," one muttered. "We drag her back. She belongs to us, not the humans." Her stomach twisted with fear, not for herself, but for the little girl who had called her family. She pressed her hands together, whispering a prayer to stars that no longer listened. "Give me strength. I cannot run anymore, not when they depend on me." When dawn came, Daniel found her still at the window. Her face pale but her eyes fierce. He sat beside her quietly. "They're coming, aren't they?" he asked. She nodded, and for the first time Daniel reached out and placed his rough hand over hers. The touch was brief but steady. "Then let them come. They will learn we don't break so easily." For a moment their eyes met, and in that silence Siora felt something she had thought was lost forever. Courage born not from pride, but from belonging. The shadows of her past were closing in, but she was no longer alone. The morning was colder than usual. A heavy fog hung low across the town, muting every sound. Daniel woke early, his instincts restless. He chopped wood behind the house, but his eyes kept shifting to the road. Siora, meanwhile, prepared the small hearth fire with Lena's help. The child hummed softly, innocent and unaware of the danger that circled like wolves. By midday, the silence outside broke. Harsh voices cut through the air. Daniel stiffened. The sound came from the road, footsteps, heavy and purposeful. Siora's body tensed before he even spoke. She felt it in her bones. Her people had come. Knock, hard and angry, rattled the wooden door. Daniel moved quickly, blocking Lena behind him. "Stay quiet," he whispered. He opened the door only slightly. His jaw clenched when he saw three figures, alien men with scarred faces, their eyes glowing with the same fire as Siora's, but colder. "Bring her out," one of them demanded. His voice was deep and sharp like broken glass. "She belongs to us, not you, human," another sneered, spitting on the ground. "You think you can keep our widow like some pet? She shames our blood and we'll take her back." Daniel's shoulders squared. His voice was steady, though his heart hammered. "She belongs to no one. She is free here, and she stays where she chooses." Behind him, Siora stepped forward, her hand gently touching his arm. "Daniel," she whispered, her face pale. "Please, I will go. They won't stop. They'll hurt you. They'll hurt Lena." Her words burned him, but before he could reply, Lena's small voice rang out. "No!" She ran past Daniel and clung to Siora's hand. "She's our family. You can't take her." The aliens laughed cruelly. "Listen to the child. A human brat claims our widow. Pathetic." One of them reached forward as if to grab Lena, but Siora moved faster than thought. Her body shielded the girl instantly. Her glowing eyes blazed with anger, stronger than hunger, stronger than fear. "You will not touch her." Siora's voice shook the air. For years she had lived with silence, but now her words came like steel. She pushed Lena back behind her. Her body stood between danger and the child. The tallest alien snarled, "You defend them against your own people?" His hand reached for her arm, but Daniel stepped in with an axe gripped tight. His voice was low and dangerous. "Touch her, and you'll lose that hand." The standoff froze the air. Siora's heart pounded. She felt Lena trembling behind her. She had promised herself she would not run this time, even if it cost her life. She would not let harm reach this child who called her family. The aliens hissed, exchanging dark glances. Finally, the tallest one spat. "This is not over, widow. You will regret choosing them." They stepped back, fading into the fog, but their words lingered like poison. Daniel shut the door hard, bolting it tight. His chest rose and fell with deep breaths. He looked at Ciora, her body still shaking but her eyes fierce. "You stood for her," he said, his voice softer now. "You didn't flinch." Ciora turned to Lena, who clung to her shawl. "I would give my life for her," she whispered. Her hand touched the child's hair gently. "For the first time since I lost everything, I feel I belong again." Daniel's throat tightened. He had feared letting her into their lives, but now he saw it clearly. She was no burden. She was strength, a shield, something he had not expected but deeply needed. He lowered his axe and stepped. "Closer, then we'll stand together, no matter what comes." That night the house was quiet, but the weight of the day still pressed heavy. Lena slept soundly, curled between them near the fire. Ciora sat awake watching the flames. Daniel sat beside her, silent for a long time. Finally he spoke. "You could have let them take you. It would have been easier." Ciora shook her head slowly. "I ran all my life, Daniel. I lost my husband. I lost my child because I could not fight against the tide. But today, when I saw them reaching for Lena, I knew I could not lose again. I will never run from family." Daniel turned his head. Their eyes met. His gaze was steady. Hers glowed faintly in the dim firelight. For the first time, he saw her not just as a widow, not just as a hungry stranger, but as someone who had chosen them. He whispered almost to himself, "Loyalty like that is rarer than gold." Ciora's lips trembled, but she said nothing. She only looked at Lena's peaceful face, sleeping between them, and in that moment, her choice felt right. Outside, the fog thickened, shadows moved beyond the fences. The danger was not gone, but inside the house something unbreakable had begun to form. Ciora had proven her loyalty, not with words but with her body and her courage, and Daniel knew then he would never let her go. The fog lifted with the dawn, revealing a sky streaked with pale gold. Daniel opened the door carefully, scanning the road. The 3 aliens who came last night were gone, but their threat still lingered in the cold air. He tightened his grip on the axe, then lowered it, closing the door quietly. Inside, Ciora sat by the fire, her shawl wrapped loosely around her shoulders. Lena lay curled up against her side, breathing peacefully. Daniel stood for a moment, watching the sight. His daughter had not slept so soundly in years. Her small hand clutched Ciora's shawl as, if afraid it might vanish if she let go. Ciora noticed Daniel's eyes and gave a faint smile. "She did not want to leave me," she whispered. Her voice was tired but warm. Daniel's heart softened. The day passed slowly, but there was no new trouble. Neighbors watched from a distance, but no one dared approach. Perhaps the story of last night's standoff had already spread. Daniel worked outside, mending the fence, while Ciora helped Lena with simple chores. The house felt alive, as if an invisible weight had been lifted. Later, as the sun dipped low, Daniel returned inside to find a surprising sight. Ciora was kneeling on the floor, showing Lena how to weave thin reeds into little shapes. The girl laughed as her clumsy hands tried to follow. "Look, Papa," she called proudly, holding up something that looked almost like a small basket. Daniel chuckled. "That's fine work." Ciora lowered her head, shy but pleased. "My son used to make these," she said softly. "He would run around with them, pretending they were treasures." Her voice caught for a moment, but when she looked at Lena, her sorrow eased. Now she learns, and it feels like memory is alive again. Daniel felt the words strike deep. For years his house had been filled only with silence and the sound of his own heavy steps. Now there was laughter, now there was teaching, now there was life, and it came from this widow who once stood outside his door, hungry and broken. That evening, Daniel made a choice. He set the table with care, placing 3 bowls instead of 2. He cooked what little they had, porridge, bread, and a bit of roasted meat he had saved. When they sat down together, he did not call her guest, he simply said, "Eat, family." Ciora froze. Her eyes widened, glowing faintly with shock and emotion. No one had spoken that word to her in years, not since her own family was torn away. Lena grinned brightly, repeating it like a song. "Family," she said, grabbing both their hands. Daniel nodded firmly, sealing it with silence. But peace is never without cost. Later that night, when Lena slept upstairs, Ciora sat with Daniel near the fire. She spoke slowly. "You know they will come again, my people, the neighbors, maybe even worse. Are you ready to carry that weight?" Daniel looked into the fire. His face was lined with scars of work and grief. He answered steadily, "I have carried heavier. I lost my wife. I carried my daughter alone. I have worked until my bones ached. If I can carry all that, then I can. Carry this too. You are not a burden, Ciora. You are the reason my daughter smiles again." Her breath trembled. She had prepared to leave many times, to walk away before she ruined their lives. But his words stopped her, stronger than chains. She realized this was no longer about survival. It was about belonging. The next morning, the town watched as Daniel walked through the market with Lena, holding one hand and Ciora walking quietly on the other side. Whispers rose, harsh and sharp, but Daniel kept his head high. His voice carried calm strength when a neighbor muttered, "She doesn't belong here." Daniel replied without hesitation, "She belongs with us." Ciora lowered her head, hiding her tears, not of shame, but of something she thought had died long ago. Pride. That night, as the stars shimmered above the roof, Lena lay between them, her small hand holding theirs together, Daniel's rough palm on one side, Ciora's gentle fingers on the other. The little girl murmured in her sleep, "Mama." The word made Ciora's chest tighten. She had not expected, it had not dreamed it, but it was real. Daniel whispered into the silence, his voice low, "You don't have to be hungry anymore. You don't have to be alone." Ciora closed her glowing eyes, tears slipping free. For years she had wandered as a broken widow carrying only hunger and grief. Now, in this small house, with this man and his daughter, she had found something stronger than food, stronger than fear. She had found home.